And welcome back to the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by my friends at Madisonville Marine. Folks, whatever kind of boat you're looking for, they've got it, new or used. We got a couple of people on the show who've bought from Madisonville Marine. They're happy. Daniel Hood, Bob Hodge, G3, Hurricane, Skeeter, Stingray, Sweetwater, you name it, they got it. New or pre-owned, Madisonville Marine. There's no better place to buy a boat. Give Steve and Joe and the team down there a call this week. All right. Mark, I'm going to get your perspective now. We talked to you as a player. Now let's talk to you as a former coach. You don't know what you're going into this year. You may have a week where these players are out. You may have a week where the opponent's players are out. You may have a week where there is no game. A game gets rescheduled. You get somebody on your schedule all of a sudden that you hadn't prepared for. Is there someone that can well, first of all, answer this. How do you as a coach deal with that? Just complete and total unknown.
Well, I think the coaches that have more principles about why they do things, how they do things as a foundation, but then are willing to make adjustments, because players will, trust is built not only through the relationships that you have with your coaches, but when you can go in and make adjustments and those adjustments work, they've got more and more faith in you. And so I think the coach that kind of beats his head over against the wall saying this is how we do it, this is how we've always done it, I think it's going to eventually the players will tune them out, as opposed to that coach that can make, that's more agile and making adjustments. And then I really think those coaches, just probably like in all of our lives right now, that are more relational, that are spending more time with those kids, they're treating them as sons or daughters, as opposed to just another person on their roster. Those ones with the relationships are ones I think that are going to be able to lead better through the continued uncertainty.
Well, and you touched on something that I think is interesting. When you look at UT, for example, normally I would say veteran coach would be better. Veteran coach Barnes has got more experience in his sport than Pruitt does in his sport. However, this is a year where it's all thrown out the window. Would it be better to have a younger coach who might not be as set in his ways, who may not be as rigid? Now, I'm not saying Barnes is rigid and won't bend, but there are going to be some guys out there who try and put a square peg in a round hole. Do you think there is an advantage to be had during this for some coaches? Is it simply the ones who are just more willing to adjust?
I think that's an advantage. I mean, one of the interesting, when I was talking to coaches in preparation for the show that I didn't even think about, they were talking about, how many of your kids, when you're talking to them on the sidelines, yes, they hear you, but they're also reading your lips. Well, they're struggling communication on the field right now because they can't read lips. And so if you're across the field and you're yelling, the yelling with reading lips, or a coach that typically his entire life has blown a whistle, can't blow a whistle right now. So it's just different things like that they're having to adjust. But I do think it's the ones with the relationships and that agility and how they coach and handle the season will be most successful. And
that should help to sell a floppy board, shouldn't it? Where you have all that you can hold up. And I think it helps the coach who's had time to build a program. I like the coaches who've been there for a while and have done a good job recruiting. How can this be a good thing for Mike Leach at Mississippi State? That has to be, even Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss. Yeah. You're still learning the names and putting faces together. So, yeah, I think, John, it is going to, could work to the advantage of some. And a lot of these coaches, guys, they're just going to treat it like another injury. Injuries are part of the game. Next man up. How many times did we hear that back in the day? So, everybody will handle it different, but some will handle it a lot better than others.
I think the new coaches at new programs with new quarterbacks are at a disadvantage. Chuck, I think you hit it. Mark, I think you hit it with the relationships. I think that's a key part in dealing with this. And you can have good relationships whether you're a veteran coach or a young coach, but I think that's the key in dealing with these players. But you also have to emphasize the safety protocols. You have to do that and make sure. And if you have a good relationship with them, I think those players are more likely to buy into what you're selling, as opposed to if you're rigid and this is the way we've always done it, they're going to say, I don't pay attention to him, I don't do what I want to do. So I think relationships is a big part of that, from the coach to the player.
I also think that a coach is going to have to, and you talk about with relationships, I also think coaches are going to have to be somewhat honest with their player. The players see what's going on. They may not believe it all, but they know what the general buzz is. So I wonder about a guy like Mike Gundy, who this summer was like, yeah, we're going to play well, everything's good, there's no problem out there. are they going to tune that guy out if they feel he doesn't care about me, he just wants to get his paycheck and gets us out there on the field? I think those kind of coaches are really going to be in danger. Anybody that's not in it for the kid, which kind of what you touched on earlier, but I do think honesty is going to be huge in this.
Yeah, well, honesty, and more than ever, we're in a world that communicates with one another. These players go to these JUCOs or they go to these, IMGs down in Florida, and then half the roster goes to different schools, and they still talk to each other. And so if one coach is telling them something at Tennessee, but the other coach is telling the former teammate at Alabama something different, the kids are going to talk about it. And so they're going to have to communicate and try to work their way through this.
All right, we've still got a lot of stuff to come. Is this a good thing or a bad thing for Jeremy Pruitt? We'll explain that question. The SEC schedule, how will they determine the extra games that you're getting? We'll discuss that. But first, while Mark's still here, I want to talk a little bit about Yves Pons. We're on the cusp of the decision day. Is he staying? Is he going? What if he goes? What would that mean for Tennessee? We'll discuss. Come on back on the Sports Zone.